Welcome. My name is Karen Long. I work for the Cleveland Foundation, the first community foundation on the planet. I am so happy to be here with you today to talk about restoring community power in journalism to sustain democracy. Those lofty ideas are going to be put on the ground with a case study in Cleveland, but most importantly, by people who have executed on the ideas here. I'd like to introduce now Dale Anglin, who is Vice President for Programs at the Cleveland Foundation and has championed and strategized the work here for several years. I would like to introduce Michael Willett, who is the Senior Vice President, Strategies and Startups for the American Journalism Project, the entity in New York without whom we wouldn't be here. And coming in shortly, I hope, is Lila Mills, the star of the moment, the founding editor of Signal Cleveland, which has gone live successfully today. Dale and Michael, do you mind saying a bit more about yourselves? Maybe start with Dale.
Sure. I'm Dale Anglin. I'm Vice President for Programs at the Cleveland Foundation. Been there for about 5 years. And in that role, work on multiple portfolio areas. And this journalism and democracy area has come up under me for the last few years. Happy to be a part of today's session, and I'll give it over to Michael.
Thank you, Dale. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Willett from the American Journalism Project. The American Journalism Project is a national venture philanthropy organization that helps grow and build nonprofit local news organizations. And we've been really honored to partner with many in the Cleveland area, including the Cleveland Foundation, for the last couple of years, culminating today with the very exciting launch of Signal Cleveland.
So I think I'm going to start us off. We're going to talk about our journey over the last, it's been a 5-year journey for the Cleveland Foundation to work in this space of information and local needs. And I'll just say we started about 5 years ago on behalf, being invited by the Knight Foundation. Thank you, Knight. Inviting some of us community foundations to the table to understand about what was happening in the implosion of the journalism space. And not just that, but also just where were people in our catchment area getting their news and information? Just a simple question. Did we have an answer to that? We did not have an answer to that. Cleveland Foundation had not traditionally funded in the journalism space. We felt like that was somebody else's job to work on. Over the course of a couple of years and peer cohorts with Knight and some other community foundations, we worked on a couple of our just issues that were of importance to us at the time, adult literacy and a couple of other things. We kept doing more and more research around, where are our local people getting their information and news? We learned pretty quickly that it was not in the places we thought. We had people in residents in Cleveland who never really focused on our, at that point, legacy news media, either our PBS station or our local newspaper, that they had never quite served them in the way that they wanted to be served. They were often getting their information, it turned out after we did a lot of research, from friends and family. There were people who were in the neighborhood who seemed to be in the know. They shared a lot of information. Some of them were old-fashioned and got information through flyers. It was amazing to see the ways in which people got information, and to be honest, the ways they did not. And so while we were doing this, for example, there was a time period where the government had shut down for about 5 weeks. Even though some people were getting information about what was happening, people who needed Social Security checks, needed to figure out how to get help, they were not getting the information that they needed at that time from our local news, because the news wasn't local enough. It was really talking national and other things. We started at the foundation thinking about, okay, well, we're not saving legacy media. We know that. But if we are to bring in another way for people to get information and news, what would that look like? We experimented over about a year or two with some of our very local newspapers, our neighborhood-based groups. We paired them together. We asked our colleges who had newspapers and radio stations to work together. We tried lots of different little experiments over time. And what we realized was that was all great, and we wanted to support that very, very local news base, and we still will try to continue to do that. But to be honest, it wasn't going to get us to the scale that we wanted. And through continuing to work with Knight and some others, we met the American Journalism Project. and the way that they talked about their work, the way you could customize how they come into a community, the technical assistance that they brought, we felt like that was the right partner to bring to our space in Northeast Ohio and hopefully to the rest of Ohio around how to build a better capacity to bring in local information and local news. And so about 2 years ago, our foundation made one of the largest grants that year, actually, to AJP in order to start this process. And let me just say from the outset, we are not the only ones at the table. We have several other foundations who are in the mix with us. We have several individuals who have joined us. We are in the midst of reaching out to others. So this will, even though the Cleveland Foundation you may see our name, this is really a collaborative. That's the only way you can survive in this world, is make it a collaborative. So I'm gonna just say that we are incredibly proud for Signal CLE to launch today. I was not quite sure 5 years ago that we would end up here. But every step of the way, 3 things have happened. One is we have had incredible assistance from the American Journalism Project itself. Technical assistance all along the way. What are we looking for? What should this be? What format? How do we build revenue sources? Every little question we had, they had an answer to. We also could look at we are not the first of their franchises. We could look at others around this country who were doing this. So we had peers that we could learn from. We also, it turns out, had local people who wanted us to do this. They were like, go for it. Foundations, people on the ground, former journalists who were no longer working in the journalism space who said, we need something else. So we were cheered along the way. And we're really happy today to launch with a 17-person newsroom, which I think hopefully Lila will get in and talk about. And Michael can talk a little bit more about how AJP is working across the country to bring this. And let me say one last thing. While all this was happening, the rest of the world was happening in the US. We saw all of the things that were happening to our democracy over the last 4 years. It just built the case for us to do this. We know that when people talk locally, they find better ways to see each other, to agree with each other, to have difficult conversations in a pleasant way. You may not always agree, but at least you can see, you can have the same problems and the same issues. When you just talk national, it's too hard. And so we're trying really hard in Ohio, starting in Cleveland, but not just ending in Cleveland, to create that space for local people to talk locally about not just democracy writ large, but also just little things like what's happening in my neighborhood. Who are the leaders in the space? How do I help young people? We're really hoping this is a space where people can see themselves and join in. And I'm going to let Michael talk about how we got documenters in there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dale. I think for us, and it's so great to hear Dale talk about the stakes that are involved in local news. I think for many who are not journalism funders, you might ask yourself, is this an area that we should prioritize with our institutional philanthropy? Our argument is yes, and I think you can hear from Dale why we see it as a necessary, fundamental, kind of systems level investment in really every aspect of your community. And at the same time, as Dale mentioned, the rest of the world was happening to us. We're seeing all across the country the commercial business model for local news absolutely fail. 80% or more of the advertising revenue that we relied on for over a century to pay for high quality news and local information has left the local news sector. The only response to that from a business model perspective is to focus your energy on subscription revenue streams, meaning less access that is freely available to consumers, raising prices, all which leaves kind of more local news inaccessible to more of our communities. So at the same time that we see local news and its importance in democracy at its peak, there's less freely available local news as newsrooms have had to cut costs in response to this market failure. So we're seeing across the country an exciting growth in the nonprofit model for local news. Our vision is that our country needs a $2 billion nonprofit local news sector within a generation to replenish community by community the local news that we need. We see many advantages to the nonprofit news model. For one, it prioritizes free access to local news and information to communities that need it the most. And we do that through a variety of sustainable revenue streams. It begins with institutional philanthropy, but you also see a diverse set of revenue streams like membership, like events, like corporate underwriting. At the American Journalism Project, we support more than 36 amazing grantees, all of whom are making the case for support in their communities, all of whom are providing exceptional, community-driven, freely available, nonprofit local news and information. So our model is we provide the technical assistance that Dale mentioned to help community leaders, social entrepreneurs, local philanthropies who aren't necessarily focused on journalism make it possible to reduce those barriers to entry to start something like Signal Cleveland.
Just as the American Journalism Project was essential for us getting off the ground, a organization that's still going great guns in Cleveland but is very young has been essential as well. It's called The Documenters. It was born in Chicago with City Bureau. It has gone to Detroit, but for many reasons, hooray, Lila Mills is with us. The Documenters were absolutely essential for a proof of concept about citizen journalism. I'd like to introduce Lila Mills from Signal Cleveland, founding editor, and see if she has the audio conquered so that we can talk a little bit about the origins. Welcome.
I can't hear you.
Well, we can hear you, Lila. Yeah.
So we can hear you, Lila, if you can speak about the Documenters a bit.
So, and maybe as Lila's getting started, I think one of the most exciting privileges for those of us working in building a new nonprofit local news sector is that while we are aiming to replenish the needed volume of original local news and information that the country has lost as the for-profit sector has declined, we have an opportunity to reimagine a far more inclusive, far more equitable local news media, and really think about how, if our end goal here is really to strengthen our democracy, is civic engagement, is kind of narrative shift, what are the programmatic ways beyond original reporting that our local nonprofits can employ towards that outcome? One of the ways that we're most proud of is a program developed in Chicago by an organization called City Bureau, which is the Documenters program that trains and pays residents to attend and document public meetings. It's an amazing program to engage residents directly into the local news process. Lila, before she joined Signal Cleveland as our founding editor-in-chief, also stewarded the effort to bring that program to Cleveland, which I know really has taken off in an incredible way. It really forms the foundation of our Signal Cleveland newsroom. So Lila, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but we would love to hear from you about the growth of the Cleveland Documenters program, if you are so technically able to share that with us.
I can hear you and you can hear me. So Michael, I actually just heard the end part of that question. Do you want me to?
So we were talking about how in the nonprofit local news movement, we have an opportunity to kind of build our own model for local news that has an impact in our community. And of course, that means things that you might expect, like beat reporters and editors, but we have an opportunity to innovate on the program side. And the Documenters program is one of the ways we're most proud of for doing that. So our question to you is, can you kind of share with our audience what the Documenters program is and how it's been built in Cleveland and how it'll kind of be involved in the newsroom going forward?
Sure. So Documenters originated in Chicago from a nonprofit media organization there called City Bureau. And basically how it works is we were the second city that they expanded to, and you're using the technology at documenters.org to allow residents, you're training them, a 1-hour training, to allow them to sign up to document, take notes at a public meeting and be paid to do so. So we call it a civic side hustle. So, you may drive Uber, you may DoorDash, you can do this and you can build your civic muscle at the same time. When we started doing that in Cleveland a couple of years ago, we knew there was demand from folks who wanted to get close to local government. They wanted to better understand how it worked. And there wasn't really an easy on-ramp for people to be able to do that. So that's what Documenters really does. It helps people get connected to local government, begin to ask questions of a local government. And overall, it's a way to kind of build the resilience and the vibrancy kind of that civic landscape. So that's what we do here in Cleveland. We've been really proud that folks here really took to it. So there are more than 600 now documenters who have signed up in Cleveland. We have a documenter in almost every zip code in the city of Cleveland, except for the Industrial Valley, and almost every zip code in the county. So what I also love about this is you can see that it is relevant for people all across our entire county. They find it useful and relevant, and that's how it works.
And it didn't spring out of just a notion. There was another thing undergirding it that was essential to its success called neighborhood connections.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really important that when we started, we really started from that community building perspective. And when we talk a lot about the work we're doing with Signal, we talk about marrying together journalism and community building. Because at the heart of it, what we're trying to do is really get connected to and listen to what people are interested in. That's kind of our demand motivator. Right? What are the questions that people are asking? What are they interested in knowing about when it comes to things like government and economics, making ends meet, education? And that's how we layer in our reporting. So the work that Neighborhood Connections has done for the past, well, it'll be 20 years old next year, but for the past 10 years, really building community networks was really essential because it helped us start from a place of trust. And with media, one of the biggest challenges we face is building trust. So we were able to kind of get a leg up by being able to start from the community perspective.
And talk about how you're incorporating documenters into the Signal CLE structure.
Yes.
So I often say that Documenters is at the heart of Signal Cleveland. And so our logo is actually right here. And it's yellow at the center. It's a reference to the Documenters Network, and that which is branded with the yellow. So that community, it's our demand driver, like I mentioned before. That's our connection to what people are interested in and what they want to know. And out of that, they are taking notes. They're showing up every day in the public meetings. And from those notes, every template they're submitting has questions that they're left wondering. So our reporters often use those questions to go and follow up on stories. They may get in conversation with the documenter over time and begin to kind of develop a sense of their own questions or their own approach to the story. I think what's going to make us so unique is how we approach stories and how we source our information.
And we have a nifty video that, even though we seem tech challenged in this session, we're going to take a swing at showing you now.
I feel learning more about what goes on in public meetings is pretty important. Before Documenters, I didn't realize people even had access to Cleveland public meetings because I kind of thought it was more private. So anyone could join Documenters. You don't have to be of certain age. You don't have to be of certain status. Like, you don't have to be a certain major. If you want to know what's going on in your community and you want to learn more about it, then I feel like you should.
This is an opportunity for citizens to hear from other citizens about issues that are being debated, decisions are being made, and it's really interesting to me how citizens' voices are incorporated into a lot of these meetings. So things that citizens care about that a paid professional reporter might not pick up on because they're writing from a completely different perspective.
our cities don't operate the way that they used to operate. And cities less dense. Highways are taking folks further away, so they're congregating in different ways. All of these different ways, folks aren't connected, sharing information. So in a sense, yes, we're filling the gaps of what reporting used to do, but we're also creating new infrastructure to serve the functions that we actually need. That's what I feel like Documenters is. We're creating a new way for citizens to engage and learn about their government in a time when it's really difficult. I mean, it's not just that citizens don't care, they don't have time. And government is not particularly accessible. Local government is not particularly accessible.
In the beginning, I wasn't sure if I was good enough to even do this. Yes, I mean, I had journalistic experience. But then when you hear the agenda, when you read the agenda, and when you learn more about what each board meeting does, I feel like it can be simplified. And that's what I like to do. So I feel like by documenting these meetings, I help give people access to information, which is access to power.
Accessibility isn't just having the door open. It's like the invitation to the door. We know the literacy rates in the city of Cleveland. We know the internet access that folks have. And we also just know that in general, folks don't feel like they have access to our government and information about our government. And so if we want this to do what we say we want it to do, we need to find ways to make that information more accessible to folks. And that means going on Instagram, and that means finding ways to do things on radio and do things on video.
The more people understand how these commissions work and the more they can be involved, the better the outcomes are. If you don't know what's going on, you cannot make informed decisions, you cannot be an effective citizen, and you might not find out until it's much too late that something that you care very strongly about has been decided by people who've never heard your voice in a way that's not going to be positive to you.
The thing that I'm most excited about is having the folks who are doing the documenting really have these conversations and begin to talk. Because by attending these meetings, they're picking up all of this civic knowledge and thinking about the ways they can use that in their lives. A civic information system is part of that civic infrastructure. It's how folks talk when they're at the bus stop, or when they're at their union hall, or when they're at the bar, and the information that they share. Community network building is really building those connections. That's the civic infrastructure that I want to be building here in Northeast Ohio.
So you don't have unlimited resources, Michael. Why Cleveland? I believe this was one of the biggest investments the American Journalism Project has made.
It is. It's our largest grant. So we committed $2.5 million to the project. A couple of reasons. So Cleveland has incredible need for more local news and information. So the landscape assessment that we partnered with Cleveland Foundations and others, revealed a striking decline in the amount of local news that's available for residents. So that's kind of the primary reason that there's need. I think secondly, we found in you all and in others an incredible set of partners to work with. That not only was there a need, but there was a viable model that we were confident that with the coalition that we've been working towards and expanding could make a meaningful impact and contribution that not only served residents' needs, but was also sustainable over time, such that we could expand this model not just across Northeast Ohio, which was our original research footprint, but across the state, knowing that there is so much need and that the democracy for residents in Ohio is interconnected, whether you're in Cleveland, Dayton, or in rural Ohio. And not only that, but we're very confident that with the model that we're taking, starting in Cleveland, that others across the country hopefully can learn from what we're experimenting with, so that we can have more local news across the country faster.
And Dale, why do you think the board bit at the Cleveland Foundation?
Right. So I think first of all, we'd spent enough time a couple of years before we got to AJP helping the board understand what the problem was. just what the implosion of the journalistic space in Northeast Ohio, what that meant for our residents, not getting access to literally quality of life information that they could use day by day, right? We showed also with documenters that there was a hunger for people who wanted to understand government. I think one of the things people say is, well, people don't really care. Well, we showed through documenters that that was not the case. If you gave them access and a way to understand government, they took that and they ran with it. We never expected to get up to 600 people already in this space wanting to document meetings, public meetings at that people think of as boring. So every step along the way, we were showing our board there was a need for this. There was an evidence to this that we needed to do this. There was a hunger in the community for it. We just needed the right vehicle, the right structure, so that we could grow this information news space. AJP provided that. So it became kind of an easy ask. I will just say that. A thing that's harder, I think, for many foundations is that most of us, even if we see the need, we just don't usually fund in the journalism space because they had other revenue sources for so long, right? So it's really the case that if you're going to fund there, if you're a foundation, we know our budgets aren't growing that much, then you're taking away from some other place. And I think what we came to see over time was when we were talking about our groups that support homelessness, or our groups that support community violence, or our groups that support youth, pick another issue area. When we were talking to residents in the community, the issue that came out a lot was about the lack of news and information. It was one of the foundational issues, no matter what issue you worked on at the foundation. So what we started to say is, you may be the environment program officer, or you may be the economic development program officer, but one of the tools in your toolbox to get information out about what you're doing, about what the problems are, about engaging people in that work, whatever you do, is news and information. And we needed a vehicle to make that happen. And AJP and now Signal CLE is the way to do that. So we're using that. We're going to have a beat reporter on education. We didn't have one person, really. We had, well, maybe one person covering all of education for all of Cleveland. That did not make any sense. We just needed some more tools in our toolbox. So we made the case to our board. They agreed completely. They saw what was happening in the community, that people didn't have access to all the information that they needed. So it became an easy sell, to be honest. And I think what we've also said, let's be clear, is philanthropy will need to be in this space for a while. And we are committed to doing that long-term with other revenue sources, with other partners over the course of a number of years.
Thank you, Dale. So Lila, we've got this model. What are the benefits? What have you seen so far?
Well, I mean, going back to kind of a little bit of Dale's answer, one of the things we often say in the community building space is that apathy doesn't exist. So people talk about voter apathy or parent apathy. And we often would say, well, you just really need a good invitation. If people aren't showing up, it's because you haven't figured out the correct invitation. So I often say that Documenters is a very beautiful invitation. It's very clear. People know what they're accepting when they come in. And then our goal is to just meet that expectation. And when you do, then people want to go beyond that. So people accept an invitation to document a meeting, but we also built community gathering spaces around that. And so people could come to the spaces and go deeper. And that's how we ended up knowing there was enough demand there for Signal. So we launched Signal today. And I've said to people, this is our first attempt to do this new model of news really based out of the demand that we're hearing from the community. And we will continue to kind of evolve that over time. So we'll layer in audio, we'll layer in social media graphics, we'll layer in outreach and flyers that will go directly to neighborhoods that based on the great reporting that you'll see our reporters did today.
So can I give an example of you guys scooping on the CMSD?
Sure.
I mean, you know, we have hired, Lila has hired quite a range of journalists, from, you know, newer people in the space to journalists who've been around for a long time, veterans. We're so glad that they are willing to join us. And one of those veterans actually scooped everybody else about a month ago when there's going to be a change in our Cleveland Metropolitan School superintendent. Because we just have, but that information is incredibly important to parents. But we didn't really have anybody on the ground, to be honest, to be able to do that work. We now have somebody to do that. And so we're looking forward to things like that being in the news, because it's really vitally important for our residents.
I think too, a lot of folks who have joined, I mean, we've got folks who are emerging, who have been documenters, who are now working as reporters, and we've got veterans. And I think everybody is just really excited by the idea of being able to be out in the community, talking directly to people, and making sure that the news and information that's relevant to people gets out as quickly as possible.
And let me just say, we still have a number of our local neighborhood newspapers and flyers and entities, our local news station, WOVU. We're going to be partnering with all of them. All of this information is freely flowing amongst us so we can double the exposure, share the stories, get it out in multiple languages so that everybody will have access to the information. We want to support the whole ecosystem. Signal Clee is a part now of a larger ecosystem. We know, remember, there used to be, 50 newspapers in some cities? We can add a few more, right? Yeah, hundreds. We can add a few more entities to our ecosystem and to strengthen the entire ecosystem.
It's a motto of information wants to be free, finding the ways to do it. So we have a wonderful LGBT publication called Buckeye Flame, and I'm seeing that reporting showing up in other outlets because we're starting to climatize the notion that these stories have many audiences and it isn't all dog-eat-dog classic journalism competitiveness. The investigative stuff is still there, but there's a lot of things people need to know when their water is turned off. It doesn't matter what outlet they're getting it in. So what's next? It's a really big day for us in Cleveland, but what can we look forward to?
I think it's building out the model and getting stronger and getting stronger in our ability to determine what is a text-based story, what is a video story, what's an audio story. I'm imagining that some of the reporting we're going to do is going to be only, you're only going to see it on Instagram. We'll launch some of our work that we're just going to do in one neighborhood of Cleveland, the central neighborhood, later this week. And we're going to do that work starting initially via text and in-person one-on-ones. So it's going to be very interesting for us to learn as we're listening and learning from people in the community what works. Is texting the way to go? Maybe we find out it is. Maybe we find out it isn't, and that it's Instagram. But we'll have a variety of ways that we're going to kind of be listening to people and testing ways of getting news and information out to the community that I think are really exciting. And of course, we want to grow our reach. So people ask me, where do you want to be a year from now? And I said, well, a year from now, we want everybody in Cleveland to know Signal Cleveland is here. And we want people to turn to us if they're having an issue in schools or an issue with local government, to be able to say, oh, I bet Signal Cleveland has done something about that.
And source stories for you. Call your reporters and say, have you looked into X?
Yeah.
And the other thing is we want to expand past Northeast Ohio. You can't focus on just Northeast Ohio. Columbus is important. Our rural areas are important to our state. And so the board of Signal is actively looking at moving into other spaces like Columbus, Akron, down to Cincinnati, some of our rural areas. We do not want this to be something that just lives just in Cleveland. That's not enough for us in Ohio.
And Michael, what does success look like from your perch for us?
Sure. So I think it's really a lot of the themes that Dale and Lila shared, but I would offer that we hear from residents kind of at scale that the fact that Signal Cleveland exists has meaningfully changed their lives, that they have access to news and information that they didn't before, that allowed them to engage in their community above and beyond what they felt like they could do prior. I think what Dale shared about proving a statewide model is so important. In the kind of nonprofit model that we're working towards here, it's very important for us as a national organization to reduce the barriers to entry for states like Ohio to organize in the ways that we are here. And by extension, it's important for Signal that we reduce the barriers to entry for communities across Ohio to come join us, right? So we now want to go to other regions of Ohio, like Dale was sharing, and say, we've built a lot of infrastructure here at Signal. We want to use that to help you. We want it to be easier to build a coalition in your market to launch a newsroom that's feasible for you. We are hopeful that there are several other areas of Ohio that could sustainably fund a 17-person newsroom like Lila leads today. But we also know that in some communities, having a 3 or 4 person weekly edition that is a 500x increase in the volume of original reporting available there is going to make a big difference. So I think seeing all of that come together over the next couple of years is what we're really excited about at the American Journalism Project.
And I think one of the things that AJP brings is this way of, like Lila said, you need an invitation to participate, the right invitation to participate. You can join Signal Cleve for what, like $5. we will have memberships. If we care about our democracy, we have to be a part of the democracy. That includes supporting local news and information. So yes, philanthropy is in, and we're going to be asking individuals to come in. If you care about, if you see things that you like in the videos and in the texting, then, you know, support it. And at its whatever level works for you. If you can give $5 a month, we'll take that. If you can give a lot more than that, we'll take that too. But the point is, it takes all of us in order to support and to raise revenue and to support the information needs that we know matter for our communities.
So that brings the question forward of no free lunch. And one of the things I don't love about legacy public television radio is the constant solicitations. How does the balance work between dinging individuals who can look for free, dinging corporations and philanthropic interests to make it sustainable? Because the sustainability question is one of the first ones in the room.
You want to take that first, Michael?
Yes, Bill, you cut out just a second for me, Karen. So would you mind repeating the question?
So since there's no free lunch, where the balance in paying for it so that people don't feel hectored every day?
I see. Yeah, I think that's something we're going to have to learn into over time, Karen, because I do think this is something new. You know, this is not something that folks in the community know about yet. They haven't heard of Signal Cleveland, just the concept that the kind of services that some people may have gotten from a newspaper at one point are now available through a community-centered nonprofit. We need to get that messaging out. So I do think we're going to need grace from individuals and corporations and allowing us to tell our story a little bit. But I think over time we're going to find that folks do want to get behind this, and therefore some of the constant solicitation that you're talking about perhaps won't be necessary because they'll have already joined the party.
So you might be able to tell that the four of us have been talking to each other for a few years. It would be really helpful if people in the session and the audience have some questions they'd like to bring. And while we're waiting for those questions, maybe that chestnut of what's been really hard is fruitful to address. Maybe, Lila, when have you been most clutched in your stomach about this process?
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, on one hand, kind of what Michael talked about is really important to note, which is we've had a huge amount of support, technical support from AJP to help us get to this point. So we would not have been able to get here in a year, maybe 2, without the AJP support. So to be able to kind of ramp up within a matter of months is really crucial. I think right now it's about building culture, and you know, any startup is going to be messy. So we want to try to contain the mess a little bit, right? And I think journalism in itself is a very hierarchical space. So encouraging, trying new things, knowing that you might fail, that they might not work, is kind of going to be a constant thing we're going to be working on. I will say, and I keep saying this, and I keep saying, I hope I'm not jinxing us, but I think things have gone so well for us in terms of hiring and getting people on board and getting this site launched that it has been fairly smooth.
And I think I would just say too that it's a real privilege of this project that we were able to raise, I believe, just under $6 million to start this at the time of announcement. That's grown to between 7.5 and 8 million now. But that was an upfront commitment from philanthropy to build to the talent that we were asking to take this leap with us. And we just think that's so important. So I think you really have to kind of ask yourself, how do you set the conditions for the best mission-driven talent to quit their jobs and dedicate the next chapter of their career to this? And I think I'll embarrass Lila a little to say that the team that she has built, very much including herself, is among the strongest in the country. And I think that shows in the amazing kind of culture and work product they're able to produce so quickly.
And
go ahead.
I would throw that that compliment back, because I think part of why we were able to attract the talent is the sense that folks had that the commitment was a sustained one, right? People aren't going to leave work and embark on these new chapter of their career if they think it's only going to last a year or two. So we were able to really say there's some sustained commitment behind this that allowed people to make that leap with us.
So Emily is asking in the chat, for other communities interested in replicating this model, where is a good place to start?
Dale.
Ooh, okay.
Well, I know your answer, and it's a great
one. Yeah. My answer is to start with documenters. Well, my answer is twofold. My answer is first to do a little homework. What's the situation in your area? What's the legacy media? Who uses it? Go out and find the people, if there are people, I'm assuming there are, who are probably not. I love my PBS station. I'm a member of my PBS station, but not everybody is. And so who's not being served in your community, and what is that causing? So that's first. And then I would say one of the easy ways to start, because it's also one of the more inexpensive ways, is to start with documenters. Don't start first necessarily with going into a 17-person newsroom. That's a little bit more work, but build the demand for the service. Find the people in your space who already care. I mean, if they care about public meetings, wow. I will just say I was a little skeptical. I don't think I admitted this to Lila the first couple of months. I was like, really? Okay, we'll see how this is going to work. It has been amazing and wonderful to meet the people who consider themselves documenters. They are so diverse. Age, race, location, interests. They just needed the right invitation. I'm sure those people exist in all other parts of the country. And documenters, by the way, is expanding. They got something like $10 million from, I forget who, to expand. Thank you. To expand around the country. So I want to give a real good sense. I mean, it costs us maybe $150,000 a year for documenters. That's not that much. You can find that amongst philanthropies, right? Just to start, just to get your feet wet, and then build the case maybe about a broader sense of information, a structure to support information needs. But documenters is an easy way to go. And I love it. I loved it at one of those Zoom calls, like maybe not even more than 6 months in. I'm listening to a city council meeting, and the city council president is going, we have a documenter here. Let's make sure we're getting this right. They were responding. Government people were responding to this new entity being in the space and doing what should happen, right? Just documenting what's happening, not commenting on it in any way, shape, or form, just letting people have the basic information of this is what was talked about, this is what was voted on, here are the things that they see as issues. It's basic stuff, but it's important stuff that we don't have access to anymore, and we've got to go back to that. So I say start with a little bit of research and documenters.
And if I could interject there, Dale, I think I just put my email in the chat. I'd love to talk to anyone who's interested in how to go about this journey. We have done programs kind of like this in 9 markets across the country, and I think really getting together a steering committee of people to say, you know, we might not be journalists or in the journalism funding space, but we see, at least at a high level, that local news is essential to democracy, and no matter what your philanthropic priority is, making sure there's journalism about your philanthropic priorities has got to be your second priority, is a great place to start. And from there, you can kind of design a process that makes sense for your community.
So can I ask a question about headwinds? Because as much of a fangirl as I am about documenters, and as acknowledging how complex our political systems are, we had historically low voter turnout in the midterms in Cleveland. Lila, how are you thinking about that?
Well, I think this goes back to that idea that being engaged starts way, way before being asked to vote. So one of the things that when people ask me, well, what's the 5-year win or what's the 10-year win? It's that the more people we can bring into this space of, and maybe you don't want to be a documenter, maybe you want to join us at one of our news clubs for discussion or conversation, you're getting engaged in that civic space. So when the question comes to voting, you're more likely to take up that invitation. But we've got to start way before just, register to vote.
Yeah, I will just say we see documenters and Signal Cle at the Cleveland Foundation as one of hopefully will be many more ways to engage the community on a regular basis, not just in an election cycle. It really is about making sure that people feel that they are part of a process, and a process that's fair, and a process that will help them understand what they need to do to just go about their everyday lives. And we're hearing from, it doesn't matter, we're hearing from churches, we're hearing from community groups, everybody's saying the same thing. It's not enough to just do voter registration. That's too far down the line. You've got to do work ahead of time, working with people day to day to help them understand how to fix their own problem and how to help other people fix their problems. And that includes information and news, right? I mean, that's just a part of that process. So we see this as a way to just engage, so that people feel like they're being helped out, because there's just a lot, a lot happening right now where it's just hard.
So Lila, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we talk a lot about relevance and trust. So people have either turned away from news and information, you could say the same thing for local government, because it feels irrelevant or because they don't trust it. So if we can address those two issues, we'll be in a good spot.
So you and I go back to the newsroom of the Plain Dealer, the newspaper in Cleveland, and it is exhilarating to be here together, but also a little scary. How has the reception been to Signal Cleveland from the older dogs in town?
So far, I think we've gotten a beautiful reception. Now, I have been impressed with how many, going back to the donor question before, with how many regular, everyday Greater Clevelanders have given us money just based on what we say we're going to do. So we just launched today, but we've been talking about this for several months. And I've been thrilled and really, really honored that people will give us $5 because we said we want to do it this way. So it actually just makes me emotional, like how people will show up for us. Now, in the standard legacy media, we have also been very welcomed, and that's because we often talk about collaboration. So it is very, very important to us that I often say, you could drop 10 signals in Cleveland right now, and we wouldn't be at the level of reporting when we were reporters together at the Plain Dealer. The diminished ranks of reporters that are in public meetings or at school board meetings over the past, 10, 15 years, we're not going to replace that with Signal. Part of the benefit of documenters is being able to get at replacing that. But so far, it's been a beautiful reception, and we do want to be as collaborative as possible, and we see ourselves as being additive and hitting in a space that no one's in right now anyway. So no one has to to get kind of up in arms about what we're going to do. We will be as collaborative as possible.
Michael, have you lessons from the national scene that you would visit on beginners or us to do this as elegantly and contain the mess, as Lila says?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I see a lot of projects launch too quickly. And I think it's because this is so new and is so complicated, launching with the right coalition behind you and the right elements in place is really important. So you see a lot of, and this is not unique to the journalism space, of course, you see small nonprofits who, are led by exceptionally mission-driven and incredible talents who just simply don't have enough funding to, put out a program that reaches an audience and that has an impact. So I think one lesson is, wait until you're able to kind of get a broader coalition behind you. And then I think the second, and this is an obvious one, but extend a specific invitation and meet expectations. Say what you're going to do and do it, and don't say you're going to do something that you're not going to do. Because I think this is all about trust, and you're not going to have a second opportunity to build it.
Can I just say, for the foundation community, some of us have to be convinced. We're trying to solve homelessness or environmental justice or youth poverty. And we're so bent on doing that, and with our space and with our dollars and others, we sometimes forget that there are multiple tools to doing that. So there's intermediaries that we form, there's direct services, there's working with government. Information and news is important. So I'm really excited, to be honest, about Signal Clee, because I now have a place to send young people who think about journalism. There was no place to send them. They're reconstituting some of the journalism work within our Cleveland metropolitan schools. They're going to be, learning about documenters and Signal Clee. We have kids who care about these issues. They just haven't had the right invitation in order to learn about them. So that's a way of building new voters, people who are more enthusiastic about our world than some of us adults who are a little jaded. So I just think, I know it is, as someone said, as a zero-sum game. When you give dollars in one space, you have to take it away from someplace else. And I understand that. And what I say to our program team at Cleveland Foundation, and so far that's been well received, is just that this is yet another tool. And this is a tool that deserves some support. Because if nothing else, do your own research. There's lots of reports out there now about what happens when you do not have local news. There is so much less involvement in government. We see it. There's so much less trust. We've got to find a way to bring that back. This is one of the ways to do that. It is just as important as solving homelessness. And so that's I think what founders have to figure out a way to see how to put this into the work that you're doing. It's not instead of, it's in addition to, and we just have to figure out how to make that work. But with us and with, everyday people, citizens who can also give money to the space.
Thank you, Dale. And Lila, there's a question for you in the chat. How do you remain bipartisan in your journalism in such a polarized environment?
I think it's an easier thing to do when you're focused on local news and information. It's the easier thing to do the closer you stay to that demand environment. What are people actually asking me to do? So the more local you are, the more directly connected to community, it's easier. With the documenters' work, they are trained in their training to just document what is happening. So what time did the meeting start? If they're documenting online and the live stream goes down, note that, note when it comes back up, note if they go into executive session, stay with it, note when they come out of executive session. So the skills they're being taught from documenting are really kind of those factual, documenting what you can show. That keeps it from getting a little bit too over the line into what you may think or interpret, very fact-based. And I think, again, keeping it based on what people want to know, right? One of the first things people asked us when we started doing is, what's an emergency ordinance? Great, we can answer that. And from there, then we can do a public records request that says, well, actually, this actually is, here's what it is. Now, actually, let's look at how often is Cleveland City Council passing ordinance under emergency. Then we found out it was plus 90% of the time. Then we were able to do some reporting that showed how that compared to other cities. And that was useful reporting for residents and for council members who said to us, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that we were doing this differently than other cities. So those are things that I think help us keep kind of out of that polarized fray.
That is really instructive, to stay close to the idea that the people closest to it have the best questions.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, it goes back to, the joy I get from seeing the diversity in our staff at Signal and in the documenters community. Because all people then are interested in that.
And it's so different from the newsroom that you and I occupied. And it's so instructive to have a chance to build something more democratic as opposed to just replace.
Right.
I see one of the successes. I've been in another place where we had we created a new local news source, and I felt like it was successful a couple of years in, where residents, when they saw something happening, turned to that source and said, can you go investigate this? They trusted them enough. They knew they needed more information, and they trusted those couple of reporters enough to say, you will do a good job. That's when the residents start reporting and saying, I need help. When we get there with Cleveland, when residents and documenters are calling the reporters and saying, look, there's something feels fishy here. Can you go look at that? That tells me there's trust built, right? And then we can move from there. It's almost like steps at a time. It's phases at a time. Let's just start with getting to know one another, which we don't do very well these days. And it can't be a reporter versus, it's a reporter with. We are all in this together, trying to figure out how to build the spaces where we live.
Was that chalk beat in Newark that you're talking about?
Yes, chalk beat. Yeah.
And it's good to know that took a couple of years.
It did. You got to give it some time, right? Trust is not built in a day. Takes a while.
Well, I think something's happening on the main stage shortly. So thank you to everyone who joined us. Thank you, Dale, Michael, Lila. Godspeed with this work. I'm going to put my editorial polarizing remark right there and wish you all with the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everybody. Take care.